Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Kramich, Chief Revenue Officer at LeveragePoint, and welcome to the first episode of our new series, Value Selling Conversations with Industry Leaders. In each episode, we sit down with some of the most forward-thinking executives in business to explore how value selling is changing the way their organizations connect with customers, communicate value, quantify outcomes, and drive growth. We're going beyond the buzzwords here, or trying to, and into real stories of transformation, leadership, and measurable business impact. To kick things off, I had the pleasure of speaking with Rick Cantril, Vice President of Strategy and Chief of Staff for Fiserv Card Services, a $3 billion business unit at one of the world's leading financial technology companies. Rick is a true pioneer in value-based pricing and value selling. Rick's launched and scaled Fiserv's global program to more than 1,500 associates worldwide, generating measurable business impact across revenue, profitability, and win rates. In this conversation, Rick shares how he got started, what made value selling click for him, and the tangible results that Fiserv achieved, from cutting sales cycles dramatically to establishing a common business language around customer value. I think you'll find Rick's insights both practical and inspiring. So let's jump in. Here's my conversation with Rick Cantril from Fiserv Card Services. So it's a pleasure to have you here with us today, Rick. I appreciate your time. I know you're extremely busy, but welcome to the LeveragePoint podcast.
Oh, and thank you for having me, Bob. It's a pleasure.
And so, hey, Rick, I know a lot of the, since I've been here in the past year, I've talked to dozens of CEOs and CROs who are wrestling with how to become more of a solution sale, how to better communicate the value and the benefits of their products and services in ways that can really help them move the needle for shareholders, increase revenue, increase productivity, reduce costs. And you're a leader not only in the fintech space, but you've also spent time in the healthcare space. I know our audience would love to hear how and sort of why did you get started with value selling in the first place, and how long ago? If you could take us through that, it'd be great to kick things off.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point to start. I think it probably speaks a lot about how I've developed in this space, and it's probably a very similar journey to others who are trying to get started. It's pretty ironic, but I did run towards value selling, value pricing, or pricing in general, which is very antithetical to who I am as a professional. But I tried to run away from it, and I think it ended up catching me. So, the perspective that I had when I started to do value pricing, value selling, was that pricing wasn't very strategic. And it hadn't been, in our organization at the time. You mentioned, I was in fintech. We were very focused on innovation, building great differentiated solutions. We had a tremendously successful selling engine in our organization. And for whatever reason, in our commercialization process at the time, pricing was very reactive. It wasn't very strategic. It wasn't very evidence-based, or at least that's how it felt, having been on kind of the FP&A side of the business. And so I was invited to participate in a corporate pilot training program for value-based pricing. And so it wasn't even value selling. I was in product management at the time. There were some corporate leaders that were looking to sponsor a program in value-based pricing. And I remember very vividly, I had said, I don't think I'm the right person to represent. I was in a different business unit at the time. I don't think I'm the right person to represent the business. I want to focus on product strategy. And I was then volunteered to participate in a value pricing training. And the irony is, as much as I wanted to run away from it, as much as I had some apprehension about what I was going to get out of it. I probably saw it as a distraction more than anything. About 5 minutes into the presentation, and it was an alum from LeveragePoint that kicked this off for Fiserv and our corporate leadership team, a number of our product and finance executives. 5 minutes in, it just clicked. It resonated. I'd been doing a lot of things in the user experience part of our business, user journeys, different types of things to look at how we quantified the impact. I was focused more on the business impact. We had technical folks that were looking at heuristic studies and trying to understand the technical experience impact. And I just felt like, wow, there's just something missing. There's something missing. We do all of these great things, and it's hard to tell that story. And like I said, with about 5 minutes into this conference, it just clicked. It's like, you know what we are not doing when we have all of these differentiated customer journeys, this impact on our clients' business. We're not quantifying it. We're not quantifying it in a meaningful way. We're not telling the story in a very intentional way. And as you get into value selling or value pricing, you learn, okay, how do you inventory your value drivers? What is a value driver? You know, does it make your clients more money, save your clients more money, deliver some kind of economic benefit? It's a very simple framework, very simple methodology, but I had no idea until somebody spells it out for you and says, hey, there's a construct, there's a methodology for this. And here's a solution that takes you kind of paint by numbers through the process of organizing an argument that way, organizing a value proposition that way. It's elusive. It really is. And I think it happens through osmosis, sometimes organically, but a bigger challenge often is, how do you do it? How do you do it consistently? Is everybody doing it the same way? And so that was, kind of my initial how I got into it. Now, why? So after the 5 minutes, right? After I was like, whoa, this is something really interesting. I think we could be really good at this. Then the why became ultimately to better tell our story. I mean, all the other things are a natural product of that, right? Selling more, winning more, reducing the sales cycle. We wanted to do all of those things. But beyond that, it felt like we were missing opportunities because something wasn't resonating. When we take it very personally at Fiserv. When a customer doesn't feel like they're getting the maximum out of their relationship, we want clients for life. That's a very real thing with us here at Fiserv. And so when that doesn't happen, we take it very personally. It's very frustrating. And the why piece, if we can get better about telling our story and building a relationship that's very mutually beneficial and focuses on the right goals that we're trying to achieve together, that's the why. That's why we do this. It's that story piece.
So what was the hardest part about getting started? Like, what was the biggest hurdle that you had to overcome?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Fiserv is a large organization. At that time, we were about 20,000+ individuals spread across, a number of continents. There were many different programs competing for attention and funding and that kind of thing. The hardest part getting started, we got lucky with one of them. So one of the keys, I think, to really being able to initiate a sustainable program is having good executive sponsorship. And we were very lucky. I wasn't necessarily the one that was trying to drive it initially. I wasn't the team that originally initiated the idea, but eventually I became the program owner for the entire company for value strategies. So before that, what really helped was our chief executive officer would kind of jokingly, but not jokingly, introduce himself as the chief pricing officer. He was very focused on driving pricing and value-based pricing back into the business. He saw it was a big opportunity. So he was very visionary that way. Jeff Yabuki, he's a wonderful leader that we had at the time. And That is a key piece. Having that leadership cover to say it's okay. This is something that we want to be good at. That was a big battle that we didn't have to fight in our organization. But probably the next step thereafter is how do you get folks to buy into this new construct, right? Everybody's very focused on how they do things, and they feel they do things at the maximum level. So introducing something new is tough sometimes. And what we did in the early stages, Bob, was we try to do it as much for folks as possible. And when we built out the program and we brought on new users, the idea was let's give them some initial training in the concept, but tie it very intimately to what they're already doing today. And this is one area that I was helpful with being able to create the credibility. You know, the team initially driving it was in our finance organization, and having come from product, I knew what it was like to be a product manager. I knew these products. I knew their value propositions. So sitting down with the product team, teaching the construct through experiential learning directly in what they were already doing was key. And sitting as right next to them, helping them do it was also very key. Once it was created, then taking it across the finish line. Okay, we've quantified a value prop. We've built it out. We've published it for sales use. Let's go along and do a ride along with a sales rep or two. And at the part where we normally do the demo, let's talk about our value prop. Let's talk about the business case of why Fiserv. Why would you invest in us as opposed to the next best competitive alternative? Fundamental things that are very key within the LeveragePoint tool and the economic value estimation process. So that was key. It was not flipping it over in kind of a generic training and then hoping for the best. In fact, we tried that model too. There were about 5 pilots that we tried early on. I say we. I wasn't leading this. So the visionaries who kind of put this together had this in 5 different areas. The ones that we did more traditional training did not really move forward very quickly. And the one area that was a little bit different, maybe it's still self-serving, but the area that I was in, the big difference was we were very much in the experiential learning model, building it with folks, getting them to use it, having capstones where they would get to go pilot it. And, probably the biggest outcome of that, not just being involved in it and being very interactive, but inevitably, when you go and pilot this with a couple of clients, you get feedback, you get immediate feedback. And the first 2 or 3 that we did, I remember actually, I'll tell you this little side story. The very first one we did at Fiserv, we met with one of our long-standing clients. They'd been with us for well over 20 years at that point, it was virtual, so it was not an in-person one. And this was before video conferencing was super big, like video. So I couldn't see the facial reactions, but I could hear, and we were sharing a screen. And we got done with the LeveragePoint value proposition, and I knew this customer pretty well, and she kind of let out a little what I'd call a shriek. I asked her, I said, "Are you okay? Is everything all right over there?" And she said, "I just can't believe I've never seen something like this ever. I've never seen something like this from Fiserv. Like I've been asking for things like this because ultimately I've got to take all this expertise, all the subject matter expertise, and all the excitement and innovation from Fiserv, and I've got to somehow build this into a business case to share with my leadership or my board." And I've never seen. I'm so happy. I need more of these tomorrow, kind of a thing.
It's invigorating, right? When you
Oh,
realize
gosh,
the value of value selling, right? It really gets
That's
you
right.
going. And for me, and Rick, you and I have talked about this. Sales is about helping people. Or if you're not helping people, why would anyone ever do business with you, right? So it's a great way to structure a conversation with someone that builds trust on their terms about who you are. And sometimes it doesn't work out, but a lot of times it does work out, and people feel better about the deals they're going to do because of it. So what early results did you guys see at Fiserv? Did you have any, initial wins? I mean, that seemed like one great example. You kind of led the witness there. But how did you sort of proliferate it so that other people sort of bought into the philosophy?
Yeah, initially the metrics that we had, this was spawned out of finance. In finance, we like to have metrics, right, and very quantifiable goals. There were a lot of qualitative things that were different about the experience for sure. Creating a more consultative engagement with clients, getting them to interact with us in a different way, to where they weren't just buying a product or dealing with a cost or budget item, but really making an investment. So those things were just the things that we couldn't quantify as easily, but there was an overwhelming sense of, this feels better than what we were doing. Kind of the old, adage of, are we better off now or before, kind of a thing. There was just this feeling of, this feels different. The interaction feels different. The relationship feels different. But then we started seeing, and it's hard because everybody wants to see results like that at the very beginning, right? Before they have a time to genesis. But very quickly, we started to see a couple of quantifiable metrics. When we were using this approach, as opposed to not using the approach, you could see this, and we measure this against all of the opportunities that we were actively pursuing in our CRM solution. We saw about 10% higher win rates when we were using this approach than when we weren't using this approach. All things else being equal. Now you could say, well, they were cherry picked or whatever, but they really weren't. They were totally random. We saw higher win rates. We saw in many cases we weren't pricing higher or getting higher prices necessarily, but we were seeing less discount requests. And what we attributed that to was, when customers really understand the value prop, the return on investment, that they're getting a fair deal, then it doesn't come down to price as much. And if it doesn't come down to price as much, then there's less pressure on the actual price point. It becomes more about, hey, are you doing more things than the other guy? And that's a conversation that everybody who's trying to grow their business wants to have.
100%. Less discounts means higher profitability. Period. Right?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. We definitely, and that's just it. It's like we might not have seen higher revenue per se, but the quality of that revenue was higher because we weren't discounting, right? So we had better discipline to list price, less price variance. But then the last thing, that we ended up measuring, so it became 3 metrics for us, the win rate, impact, the profitability or the price variance reduction impact. But then we also saw that the sales cycle time dropped pretty dramatically, almost, rounding, it was about half the sales cycle time. And in our industry, the average cycle time might be 8 to 16 months. It's a very long process, especially if there's significant change within a financial institution, partner of ours, or if there are multiple things that are being adjusted at the same time. And so, when we saw that cycle time reduced in half, the idea wasn't, the hypothesis, and we confirmed this, wasn't that, well, it was taking less time to win. It wasn't that. It was easier to make a decision. That a lot of the cycle time was just back and forth of not having the right information, not knowing, I think that your solution is good. I want to believe you, but I need to be able to prove that. I need to be able to build a business case. And if I'm having to do a lot of due diligence and research and putting stuff together, that takes time. So it was kind of the old adage of win fast, lose fast. So I think you mentioned this early on. In cases where it didn't make sense, we were able to realign close a bad opportunity and get to a different solution, perhaps that might have better fit the scenario for a financial institution, or in other cases like the positive case, we were able to help cut through the noise and allow them to add on to their portfolio, their technology portfolio, and just move forward instead of having to go to a consultant or out to the RFP market and things like that.
Did you find that it helped create a more consistent and uniform business language around what your value drivers are and how you communicate them to your customers? Do you think across multiple salespeople, did it help in that area?
It's funny you bring that up because I used to do training. I used to share at the very beginning. There was like a handful of things I'd put in a preamble, and this is one of those things where I would share with folks, hey, if we are sending our message 5 different ways through our reps or through our product people or whatever, then we're doing it wrong 4 times. And I would always just leave a pregnant pause there. And the idea was somebody's doing it like the best. Somebody has the best way of communicating, and we shouldn't just leave it up to chance that, and it's kind of a money ball thing, right? That, well, they're not too far, levels of variance, from the one that's doing it the best. So it's probably okay. No, we want everybody to be doing it the way that is the best way, right? That's what we wanted. And so having a tool like LeveragePoint, in this particular case, was pretty critical because product managers often suffer from, I just built this product. We've put all this investment into this solution. I've trained the market-facing teams, or I've trained the marketers, or I've trained whoever, right? Whoever's going to be sending the message. And then I just got to hope that they evangelize the message. And with a tool, I don't have to hope anymore. I can review it. Like, we sit down together and, okay, is this how we should explain it? No, that's not how we should explain this. It should be this other way. Or yes, absolutely. That's exactly the way that we should describe this, because with my subject matter expertise and talking to, the clients or the focus groups or the consultants or whoever came up with the idea behind why we built what we built, this is what we were hearing. This was the need that we're trying to address. This is the way people who are experiencing this problem think about the problem. So we should communicate in a way that it's going to immediately resonate. So it takes that problem out of product management. From a finance perspective, you put together a pricing model. And again, you just hope and pray that gets articulated. Well, now you don't have to hope and pray. Now you don't have to wonder. It's always presented exactly the same way. And, for people who manage reps, leaders who are trying to have a very consistent approach. You don't want one rep that's super, super successful and one that's not. And we could take the very best reps, the very best ways of presenting things, and make even the worst reps like me present just as good as the best. I was out, selling just like, any of the other reps that we had. And, when I first started doing that just to test it, I was like, well, it was kind of horrific because I am not a salesperson. But it can make even a finance nerd geek like me just as articulate as the very best rep that we have. So it's very cool that way, being 100%. Able to have a truly interlocked, consistent approach to telling.
And for the CFO aficionados out there, right, and the finance folks, it also captures a lot of data across all your salespeople, right, which is an added benefit of a platform, a good value selling platform like LeveragePoint's. Every time there's a formal final pitch made to a client where you have input assumptions based on their information specifically, or not even assumptions anymore, actual, what is their situation? You get to roll all that information back up across all your reps, across all your prospects and customers, and really analyze that data. And I think that provides a lot of value too. Would you agree in that sense?
100%. Yeah. If we get more, into the nuance of how it's actually done when you're actually doing it, that is one of the things in the heat of, I've now just launched a new product or a new campaign. Here's the value prop we're using. One of the things you very quickly learn is getting that feedback from the first couple of prospects. In the past, it just goes into the ether. How did your engagement go with such and such client? Well, it went well, or it went poorly, or whatever, right? I mean, you might get some of that feedback. You might have, full case plans where you talk about your call prep, right? I think that's the sales terminology, right? You build a whole, engagement plan. So you might get some of that information, but I found that was lacking. It definitely was lacking for us. And what LeveragePoint allowed us to do is if we went out and the first couple of clients we talked to said, this seems very overstated, we could go and address that and understand it and then immediately update the go-to-market material. And I think that's something that folks probably don't appreciate if they're not using something like LeveragePoint. LeveragePoint was real-time updatable to all reps at all given points in time. And you'd be surprised how few actually ask, hey, it seems like some of this stuff changed. I don't even think I got that question, when we were doing things. The assumption changed from 10 units to 8 units. Update it. Everybody's using that from that point forward. And, like I said, nobody really, we were doing it with 1,500 reps at our peak. No one really questioned that. We were using different ways of describing a value driver than what we used yesterday. Again, everybody's immediately doing that. So in their next deal, they're using the same messaging or whatever that we've changed for everybody. So to your point, being able to update the models very quickly allows you to kind of centrally administrate the value prop. I mean, it created a structure in which we could administrate the value prop centrally for consistency and also to be very, agile, to move where it needed to move if we were hearing different feedback from the market. If you got time for an example, here I got one really quick,
Sure.
good example.
100%.
So we have a solution that this is a number of years, probably about 10 years ago when we started this partnership, but it's a solution that does what's called hot card controls. So being able to turn your card on and off. So, and the idea was when we partnered with this organization, we want to be able to reduce fraud. Fraud happens if somebody steals my card, if somebody steals my information. Wouldn't it be cool if I could turn the card off and then only turn the card on when I'm going to use it? So you steal my card, it doesn't do anything, right? It's dead until I turn it on. So we call this concept called hot carding. We went to market with this partnership solution as a fraud risk mitigation tool. So, hey, this is going to reduce your fraud. That was the primary, value prop. And we were struggling early on to get adoption among our customers. So this was a partnership we have since acquired this company, but it was a partnership that we had, and it just wasn't resonating early on with clients the way we knew it should. Like this is exciting. This is game changing. There was an ad on the Super Bowl at one point about this. It was really, really cool. So then we start seeing some results come back from some of the early adopters. It's like, hang on a second, it's reducing fraud, but look at this. It's impacting interchange. So the revenue that our clients were getting out of transactions. And we're seeing higher carrying balances in these accounts. And so the interest spread is higher for financial institutions. And we start looking at it, you know what, this is kind of a revenue producing tool. It's not just a fraud reducing tool. So we started pivoting that value proposition messaging to start with, hey, this is going to help you earn more revenue. And, it's kind of one of those things where, they're equally good value drivers, they're equally good value propositions, but we found that value proposition resonated a lot more, especially with the trends at the time. Everybody was looking for revenue growth. As soon as we changed that message, completely different momentum that we got out of selling that value prop, and we got a lot different questions from our clients. They took the fraud reduction piece as a given. But now what was getting this investment to the top of the line was, oh, but it also drives revenue. So when it's competing with other revenue initiatives, it's like, well, we check that box. And we're also helping to reduce fraud and liability for the institution. Well, that's a 2-for-1 deal. That's a no-brainer. And we sold it, very, very quickly thereafter. It's one of our best products. I'm very proud of it. I got to, call them out. It's our Card Hub team is what that's graduated into.
Awesome.
It's a
That's
world-class
awesome.
solution for card controls.
That's awesome. I know you've generated, from what we've talked about before, over $1 billion in incremental, revenue influenced by value selling, which is really incredible. I guess, there are a lot of companies out there that aren't your size and that are mid-size or smaller, or even large companies that are contemplating, I want to do this, but how do I start? What would you say to somebody? We're just two guys talking value here, Rick, right? So what would you say to somebody who's contemplating a program? What is one thing, a couple things? What do you think they need to do?
We called our engine for this the collaboration silo, and oxymoronic and all that. It worked. We in our collaboration silo, we're going to have representation from product and from finance and from sales and from marketing, and we're going to bring them together. And we created a thing called the Value Immersion Program, VIP. And it was a week-long program where we would bring professionals from different areas together. They would sit down, whether they knew a product or not, they would get a product, they would team up with an SME, and they would start building out a value prop. What are the things, the feature capabilities of this solution? What's it supposed to do? What's the reasoning for it? What are the business benefits that each of these investments are supposed to drive? How do those then translate into value drivers, right? How do you make more money, save more money, or deliver some kind of economic benefit?
What are the KPI?
Tiger team and innovation center of excellence type of thing together to then actually commit to doing it and trying it, but like soup to nuts, build it, communicate it, use it in practice, and repeat. That I think is one of the that's a catalyst for sure to getting started and being successful.
And it's kind of like motherhood apple pie. Implement these best practices. Well, hey, Rick, I can't thank you enough for your time.